the number one recommendation we always make to every client that we talk to about this, it's a human in the loop.
Yep.
Do not make an AI make the decision and action that decision.
Yep.
Someone's got to review that. Someone's got to review the content. Someone's got to review the decision it wants to make. Someone actually has to say, yes, we need to do it. Until such a time that you can say with 99.9999% accuracy that the AI model is correct and accurate, don't automate it.
Yep.
You know? Someone's got to say yes.
Welcome to the Make Tomorrow podcast, where we venture into the heart of innovation and technology. I'm your host, Tristan Sternson, the global co-lead of our NCS Next business. We're going to invite on some very exciting guests onto this show. We're going to talk about their Make Tomorrow and how technology and innovation are shaping the world. In this episode, we're exploring Make Tomorrow Smarter through the lens of fascinating world of artificial intelligence, a field that's not just transforming industries, but redefining the very way we work. From predictive analytics to neural networks, AI is a cornerstone of the next wave of digital revolution. And who better to guide us through this journey and leading the voices in AI is Nikita Atkins, the Artificial Intelligence Lead for NCS Australia. So welcome to the show, Nikita.
Thanks, Tristan. Thanks for having me.
Nikita stands at the forefront of AI and innovation, driving advancements that span continents and industries, with a role centered around harnessing the power of data science, advanced analytics, deep learning. Nikita's work is pivotal to AI's trajectory within the whole technology landscape, and he has an extensive experience that we're going to go through today. So, Nikita, just to get started, when we were having a conversation before, I'm going to pick on one thing from your future, not from your past, right? And it leads to the future. So, I read in your background that you have extensive experience in sports and AI, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, that's an interesting start to the conversation.
Absolutely. I actually fell into it by accident. So been doing AI and data science for a long time. We'll talk about that later, but fell into it by accident where we were talking to various teams. And in fact, I started doing some work with Rowing Australia, and it was really interesting work where, you know, what they were trying to do is using data to help improve their athletes. They've got great sports scientists and they do a lot with diet and that side of things. So most athletes actually have sensors on them, whether there's a tracker or there's catapult sensors and so forth, and then GPS, and it tracks everything. It tracks their heart rate, how fast, how hard they run, everything, a lot of things, blood pressure, and there's a huge amount of things they track. And what we realized pretty quickly is a huge amount of data for every athlete. Anyway, I played around with it, did some work, as I said, with Rowing Australia, but the bulk of what I did I did a lot of work with Rugby Australia.
Right,
actually working in the high-performance team back when Michael Checker was the head coach of the Wallabies. And it was really fascinating work where it wasn't just with the men's team, it was the women's team, it was the sevens team, the Super Rugby. And it was using data to help drive decision-making. And it was not just decision-making for the elite teams, it was looking at the Super Rugby teams, how they can be more competitive, but also talent identification. What schoolboy rugby players do they think we're going to make the jump into elite? Identify them early so that you can actually, you know, mentor them and coach them. It was a really fascinating work. I did that for 2.5 years, and the amount of information and insights that we pulled out of for the Australian team, for the schoolboys, Super Rugby, and their competitors just helped that team just compete at another level.
Yeah, wow. So you're the Moneyball man, right? Yeah, okay. So when I'm doing my next fantasy football league, I'll engage you in it. And I wear the whoop, right? That's my analytics on my body, but I'm huge into the analytics of sports and just science on individuals themselves. I think we've done some stuff with Tennis Australia as well in the past and around the analytics of serving and stuff like that. So that's really interesting. But I find the foundation of sport, because it's an easy thing to understand, is a really good way to work into the corporate world to some extent, right? How have you found, so you've gone from, I mean, that was the early days, right, where you're analysing a peak performance of people. Talk about peak performance of businesses. Like, how does that transition?
You're absolutely right. It is natural synergy. instead of looking at, so, you're looking at the sports world where you're looking at, how fast, how hard they're running, the heart rate, that kind of stuff. When it comes to businesses, there's even more data than what sports have. You're looking at your financial numbers, your sales number, your revenue numbers. You're looking at your assets and how hard they're running. It's the same concept. How do you get the most out of your resources, out of your assets? How do you make more money? How do you reduce costs? These things are natural synergies between the sports world and the business world. The data is different, and obviously, what you're trying to get out of that is slightly different, but the data and ultimately the models are the same. So, yeah, there are strong synergies between that. And I think what's really interesting, and the one difference I think in the business world is sports world, actually a lot of structured data because there's very simple data streams, with the exception of video. In business world, there's a lot more unstructured data.
Yeah, okay.
And getting the value out of the unstructured data that businesses have is actually, I think, the key, and where we're going with AI in the next 12 months to 2 years. There's so much gold in there. We've always known there's gold in there. We've been talking about unstructured data for years. But I think for the first time in the last 12 months, we've now got some genuine tools that allow us to use that and exploit that.
I saw a funny meme recently that says it was an idiot's guide to AI, and it said, it's just data. Right? I mean, that's what it is, right?
Funny you should say that. So the UN released a recent report around the state of AI around the world. And one they had lots of recommendations, but one of the key ones they said was that you cannot separate AI governance and data governance.
Yeah.
To do good AI, you need good data. And to do good AI governance, you need good data governance. And I find that interesting because a lot of organizations that we talk to are separating the old data science world and the AI world. And I think there is a lesson here that people need to think about carefully, that yes, you can have different teams doing that, but you need to make sure they are in sync.
Yeah.
And making sure that the governance is working across both teams equally.
So we're going to get into governance later. Like, you can never start a conversation with governance because we'll lose our audience, right? But we're going to start with the exciting stuff and work into why it needs to be applied that way. So September 2023... what are we? No, September 2022, right? It's almost a famous date now, right? Because ChatGPT was launched, right? And it was I don't think it was the fastest ever uptake. I think it was the second fastest uptake of any digital technology ever, right? And all of a sudden, everyone knows about AI, right? Generative AI, right? But I don't think it gave rise to generative AI. I think it gave rise to AI in general, right? What are your thoughts about September 2022?
Oh, it's funny you should say that. September 2022 is an interesting day because obviously, especially around Australia, we're just coming out of the pandemic. We feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're all talking about, the new normal. And then something like ChatGPT and DALL-E, even before that, just throws that in a spin. The new normal may actually be more or less normal than we thought it would be. As an early adopter of ChatGPT, it's just come leaps and bounds. Just even the last 12 months. As a person who works in this space and tries to keep up to date with Gen AI, every day, every week, there's new things. I can't keep up with it, to be quite honest. Luckily, I have a team behind me helping me do this. But it is really quite exciting, the work. And one thing that September 2022 has taught me is, as an AI practitioner, I've given up trying to predict what's going to happen in 12 months.
Yeah.
People could ask me, what are we going to do in 2024? And I'll take my best stab at that. But it's just remarkable how quick things have evolved.
I think one of the coolest things we did, and this is not a commercial use, was when we took a combination of 3 people in NCS. We took myself, Copin and Winthia, and we merged this into a digital human called Iris. I don't know if you remember that at our big next launch. And Iris gave the prediction of technology going forward. And I think 50% of people were fooled. They actually thought it was an actual human, right? Leads me to my next question, right? You can't talk, this time of the year in Australia at the moment, without bringing up Taylor Swift, right? So how does Taylor Swift and AI come together? Deep fakes of Taylor Swift.
Oh, yes.
Right? Talk to me about deep fakes.
Oh, Funny enough, I did an interview a week before the whole Taylor Swift, and they said, "What's the number one thing that you're worried about with AI?" And I actually said, "We've got to have better regulation, particularly around deep fakes and how AI can be used for nefarious reasons."
Yeah.
So, for those people who've been living under a rock, obviously, yeah, Taylor Swift. Unfortunately, someone has used AI to basically come up with deep fakes of Taylor Swift, basically naked and in compromising positions. And it's purely AI. It's absolutely, and it's just spread like wildfire. Despite, I think they started off on Instagram, but I know Twitter closed the account that was publishing it. But by the time it had done it, it had like 40 million likes. It just spread like wildfire. Deep fakes, and this is the challenge with any new technology. AI can be used for so many good reasons and good things, but it needs to be managed and needs to be controlled, because then you're doing these things like deepfake. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, there was one where Obama, they basically had a deepfake of Obama, sound like Obama, looked like Obama, and it was a deepfake of him saying this stuff that he would never have said. And it just shows you how easy it is, and it's getting better. You go even 2 years ago, I could look at a deepfake and go, "That's a deepfake. I can identify it."
Yeah.
But nowadays they're getting so close, so good. It's getting harder and harder. I don't know if you've read the news recently. There was another one, and this was in the US, I think. Someone had set up a deepfake Zoom call, or I don't know if it was Zoom or Teams call, but it was a conference call. And this finance guy was in a meeting with all his colleagues, including the CFO. And the CFO was in Hong Kong and he was in the US, I think. And the CFO basically said, "Right, we need to resolve this. I need $30-something million transferred to this account." And the guy thought he was talking to the CFO and transferred it across.
Yeah, right.
And except for the one guy, everything else on that Zoom call were deep fake digital humans.
Yeah, wow.
And they scammed this company of, I think it was $36 million US.
It's amazing, right? So we've seen it in our own business, right? I've had people deep fake me. In fact, I had someone create a Twitter account of me. It wasn't a deep fake once, and it was a fake one. The unfortunate thing is they had more followers than I did, right? And I got really pissed off at that, because I thought, geez, if I could have 40 million viewers of my Taylor Swift deep fake, well, there you go. But actually, before I get to my next question, we did an activity at Tesseract, and it was me and my 9-year-old son. And they showed 10 different pictures side by side, and we had to pick which one was generative AI and which one was real, right? And it's amazing. Kids get this better than adults, right? Because they're brought up with it, right? So what do we do to prevent? Like, what are the things we should be looking for? Are there things out there that we can, to avoid a deep fake like that? Is there certain things you can notice, or is it just getting too hard?
It's getting too hard. There used to be things that I would look at. So, even deep fake with images, I used to look at, things like AI used to basically be too pixel perfect.
Yep.
If you take a photo, there's always some blurriness in the background, and up front there's a little bit more focus. So I used to look for that. No, they're even getting better at that, because the AI used to basically look like one continuous image. So it's getting really hard. So I guess the key thing is, I think we can take a lot from journalism in terms of go back to your primary sources. If you think it's fake, don't click on a link, go to the primary source. If you think it's an image by someone, if you can email them or look it up. So it's going to get hard. It's going to get really hard, and we will need to look at ways to manage that. I think governments are doing a lot in terms of regulations, but I think there's a responsibility of companies that are using AI. They need to think about how they use it, and what disclaimers and what disclaimers they need to disclose when using AI. And I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation over the next 12 months.
Yeah, we talk a lot about human in the loop.
Yes.
Right? And how humans need to be involved in a lot of this AI conversations. I mean, that's how you get away from, as you just said, like someone asks you for $30 million, well, call them on the mobile. Hey, mate, do you really want that? Yeah, sort of thing. But we can pick up a lot of these things. But human in the loop, how important is that then?
Human loop is so important with AI at the moment.
Yep.
No AI. I don't believe that any AI is foolproof. AI still make mistakes or hallucinations, or even and even traditional AI like computer vision. You can easily fool an AI to say this. Everyone looks at it and go, "That's a cat," but AI can think it's a walrus or a car or something like that. So you can still fool an AI, and we can talk about AI hacking, which is a new form of hacking that you can actually force AI models to change how it behaves.
Yeah, right.
It's scary. So you can feed enough false data to it, and if the model gets retrained, you can then actually do it. And there's examples where people have got around insurance companies by doing lots of really poor insurance claims that get rejected, but so that their other insurance claim that may be on the borderline gets accepted.
Hey, we got to go down to this. This is cool, right? So let me just think about this for a second, right? So I could go back to my bank, create a whole bunch of fake AI, hack into it, and they go, "Oh, he's really creditworthy. Let's lend him $10 million and walk away with what's a $10 million car, but a very expensive car." Yeah.
This is why data governance is so important. So yeah, exactly. Well, so what happens is you basically feed lots of stuff to something that is an AI model, and it rejects it, and that's fine. But all that data tends to be used the next time when it retrains that model, maybe in a month's time, 3 months' time. And as a result, sometimes we see things like thresholds can get lowered unless they're rule-based. And so, this is called adversarial attacks, or I like to call it AI hacking, AI model hacking. This is dangerous.
Okay, so we're going to turn this from a horror movie into something a bit more dramatic. Well, maybe not dramatic, something a bit more educational, right? Some positive thinking, the comedy side of it, maybe. So let's go through governance, and then I want to get on to AI for good, right? So talk to me a bit about governance. Governance is an important thing. We've had data governance for years and years and years, right? There's governance on everything. I mean, the law is governance for everything we do humanly, right?
Yep.
Governance within AI, how does that work?
Yeah, governance within AI is a really interesting, challenging proposition, but it's something that we are getting better at. So let me take a step back. As I said, you cannot split data governance from AI governance. And this is the first step. How do you make sure that you have the right data, training the AI models? Well, this is why we hire data scientists. This is why we hire AI engineers as well. You need to have good data, and in the future, and you need to be able to audit your trail. So understand how you got to this AI model along the way. That's step one. Step two is you need to have a strong, we used to call it ML Ops. ML Ops, basically managing the whole operational landscape from the model to use to retraining. That's the second step. And I'm surprised with the number of organizations that do machine learning that still don't have a strong ML Ops governance framework. So you've got to have that. And then the third step is how do you make sure that you can test your model to make sure it is not biased, not hallucinating and doing all these things. What's really interesting is over the last 12 months, 2 years, if you've gone back 2 years ago and talked to me about how do we make sure an AI model is behaving correctly, I would have talked to you about machine learning transparency or model transparency. That is, or explainability. That is, you say, okay, if we put these numbers in, this is what the model will come up with, and explain how all the different data changes that. That was easy because we only had 20 variables, 30 variables, 100 variables. It's easy to explain. Yeah. With generative AI and some of these very large AI models, we've got 1 billion parameters. You can't explain it. How do you explain to a human how 1 billion parameters was consumed by an AI to come up with this answer? So I even find the whole world of AI explainability has now changed, and it needed to change because our AI models were naturally going to get much more complicated. So now instead of talking about how do we explain the model, we are now talking about how do we test the model, how do we verify that the model is good.
Yep.
And so that requires testing, it requires human in the loop, and having a strong testing framework to make sure that you can do that. So one of the things we do when we do proof of concepts is we've got like a dozen different generative AI models we use. Some are open source, some are not. And we actually have a testing framework that says, okay, in this scenario, let's send the same prompt to 20 different models. And let's look at the responses. And what happens is a human looks at those and goes, which one is the best one? This one, that one? Because you can't use traditional metrics to say, one is correct and one is not.
Yeah.
AI is now, particularly Gen AI, is now subjective. So you need someone to say, okay, which ones? And we do that when we do all our proof of concepts to make sure that we're picking the right model for the right use case.
Yep. And there's a lot of work in Australia at the moment. I mean, you got your Tech Council of Australia, you get your governance and AI and stuff that are popping up. They can't pop up quick enough, right? It's the way I see it at the moment, because to me, governance is the framework around what needs to happen, right? But people are worried that AI is going to get out of control and do stuff and hallucinate and change pixels and turn a cat into a dog and a dog into a car and a car into a cliff and whatever it's going to do, right? Is there an off switch? Is there somewhere where you say there's a stop button to something? Do we need to kind of implement that?
I think this is why the number one recommendation we always make to every client that we talk to about this, it's human in the loop.
Yep.
Do not make an AI make the decision and action that decision.
Yep.
Someone's got to review that. Someone's got to review the content. Someone's got to review the decision it wants to make. Someone actually has to say, yes, we need to do it. Until such a time that you can say with 99.9999% accuracy that the AI model is correct and accurate, don't automate it. You know? Someone's got to say yes. Right? You can make it create 2,000 different marketing campaigns, but someone needs to make sure they are correct before you say send.
All right. So let's move to the positives, right?
Yep.
So one of the ones I love in Gen AI is the medical world, right? Because I think of the impact we can make, right? So years and years ago, Watson, as a technology, started trying to predict, take symptoms into diagnosis and treatments, right? So cancer is an example. We did some work with the cancer council around linkages between symptoms and diagnosis and outcomes and everything else that you needed to do. How are we're seeing these advancements every day. What are some really good examples like that where we can use it for the good? You do want human in the loop there. You don't want to go and a computer tell you you're going to die in 3 hours and there's no treatment, or go take this drug and it has adverse reaction to you, right? But
So you're absolutely right. Medical one is actually probably one of the best use cases we've got. So we all acknowledge doctors, nurses, medical staff, they are so time poor, right? And they always complain about their paperwork, and it's necessary paperwork, but they need to do it. So we're looking at ways that we can actually make life easy for them. So I'll give you an example. The first use case we did in this area was, let's say a doctor has their phone with them, and they can have an app on there that has generative AI. And what happens is the doctor says, I'm going to see this patient. And that AI will have all the notes that that patient has on their phone ready to go. They can review it before they enter the room. But they can press record and they can go into the patient and have a conversation with the patient about what they've seen, what their observations are, what the next steps are. Maybe they need to get patient's consent about something as well, It records all of that. It then turns that into notes for the doctors.
Yep.
If it picks up any prescriptions, it writes the prescriptions out, and it's all on the app. Now, it doesn't say send. It sends the doctor then reviews those notes, and instead of writing these all out, it can then just add anything that's missed along the way. It can look at the prescription and go, yep, that's all right, say send. That is a really good example, because what happens now is we're taking all that paperwork away.
Yep.
60, 70% of the time can be paperwork. If we're reducing that means it can see more patients. It can focus on what they do best, healing patients. We've taken that and then we extended that and say, okay, that's good for doctors. Let's do the same thing for nurses, right?
Yeah, okay.
And then the next step is we said, well, how do we extend this even further? And so the doctor says, okay, if as a general practitioner, I'm seeing someone that has a stomach upset. Oh, I've seen a second person with a stomach upset. Well, what the app can say is like, well, if you're in a larger general practice, you can actually, or in a hospital, you can say, we've actually picked up 20 different patients with all the similar symptoms. Maybe there's some kind of issue here. Maybe there's dodgy food. So you can actually give doctors in real time better information so they can actually say, oh, actually, no, this is actually part of a larger pattern in the community.
Yep.
We actually now know what that is, and we're making sure that we're consistently diagnosing the right information. You still need the doctors in there because, you could have 20 patients, 19 could be part of a cluster. There's always one exception. So this is why you still need that human in the loop. But it's giving the right information to the doctors when they need to, taking away manual work, and so that they can do what they do best. I think this is a fantastic opportunity around medical.
All right. I'm going to think out loud here, right? So I love my biohacking, right? And everything's tested in mice, and we haven't had anyone live to 120 to really test anything out, right? Yeah, AI is good at interpreting documents, research, and then just reading it and telling you what it finds, right? Is there a level where it can actually start doing some testing or trialing and testing and trying?
I think it's really good example. So I think they're well, I can say for sure that they're doing that at the moment. So
Yep.
my son's actually a chemist, and they're using AI to find new proteins, new chemical components. What would take years, decades to do, the AI model can do it in minutes.
Yep.
And so they're trying all these different combinations. They find one that they think will work, and then the chemists or the researchers can go and actually develop that protein.
Well, then that's evidence based, right? Because it's testing, which is not what mice aren't evidence based. It just injects and see how it goes, right?
Exactly right. And this is where you're talking about biohacking. That goes back to my sports analytics days. It's like what we want to do is actually use AI to actually treat you as an individual. I'm not a healthcare expert, but to date, it feels like everyone is lumped together. But
Yep.
how your body reacts is different to how my body reacts.
Yep.
You may have slightly different reactions to the same medicine, the same food. We can use AI to say, we know, you do a full body scan, we do lots of data around you. We actually now know a lot about your body, Tristan. Let's now use AI to actually say, well, I don't know, God forbid, but you have high blood pressure. What's the best what's the best drug for your particular needs based on what we know about you? This is where I think the future of AI is. We talk about predictive medicine. This is where we're going, and it's treating your body, your symptoms. And then we talk about DNA. We often know what health conditions you are more likely to have based on your DNA. So what the healthcare system is starting to think about in medicine is, well, let's actually not treat your problems when they happen. Let's start treating your problems
Preventative.
before they happen so that you don't ever have it again.
Love it. Love it. Health is one area. I also had a great conversation in Singapore with a couple of people recently about policing and looking at protecting the community, right? Because you can also predict people's behaviours, right? So there's patterns and stuff which can predict, and it's happening all the time, prevents crime, right? I mean, that's another industry I really like looking at because I think, want to live healthy and you don't want to be, you want to avoid crime, right? So there's all different things. Any other cool industries you think, we got sports, we got that?
Well, I'll just say public safety is another good example.
Public safety, yeah.
Public safety. So, there's, again, my sports analytics, you'd be surprised how much that comes back to that. I've talked to defense previously about having the same sensors that athletes have on soldiers, on fighter pilots. Yeah. So you can actually understand what they're doing. Particularly fighter pilots, they're under enormous forces, physical forces when they're flying these planes. How do we make sure that we are getting the best out of them, understand how their health is being affected, and treating them like the assets they are? Same thing with soldiers. So the great thing that we did with sports analytics is we could predict some injuries, not all, but we could predict some injuries before they happen. Why don't we do that with our soldiers? Oh, we actually noticed that your heart rate is slightly elevated.
Yep.
Let's go and get you health checked. We don't want you breaking down in the field when we need you the most. This is the same concept. Same thing with policing. Why don't we have policing they've got body-worn cameras now. Why don't we have a sensor on the back? Not because we are trying to monitor everything about them, but we want to make sure that we're getting the best out of them. And ultimately, I think this is going to be something fundamental that's going to go forward. And I could argue white-collar workers is the same. Why we don't want another pandemic. No one does. Why don't we start thinking about how can we look after our employees the best? We talk about OH&S. I have many of my family members in OH&S. We always talk about health and safety. Yeah. The problem is 99% of our budget is around the safety. How do we stop them having an accident?
Yeah.
And spend 1% on the health. Why don't we start talking about the health aspect of OH&S?
Yeah, that's interesting. Because just thinking through that, we did a really cool piece a few years ago on the safety part. It's huge in mining, right? And we did it around predictive analytics of a machine in its conditions and its heat. And rather than giving someone a generic, here are the 10 things to check, it was real time. It was like, for this machine, this is the thing that is most likely to injure you. So you must look at this before you look at other things and doing it in real time, but not the health side of it. That's really interesting too. In fact, I'm thinking of an idea where I put an AI tracker on my daughter every time she walks into Mecca that reads her dopamine or whatever it is that kind of gets her so excited and reverses that, so I save a shitload of money. Anyway, this is really fascinating. If you had a blank check, right, it could create one technology for the good. Yep. It's got to be for the good of the world, and it's AI related. And I'm not paying the blank check, by the way. Someone else will. What is it?
This is aspirational in an extreme.
Love it.
I want an AI model that controls everything to do with our utilities, right?
Yep.
We don't need... So if you can imagine an AI that completely manages, and this is almost going out there in Terminator territory, but if we had a utility, an AI that could actually control electricity, generation, solar, and all that kind of stuff, there is too many variables, I believe, today that one human or a team of people in a control room can manage. I think at the moment, having an AI that can manage all of that so that we can have the best sustainable outcomes, that we can make sure that we're not, so we're not having brownouts in South Australia, or we're not having, when generators shut down, that we're not actually left holding the lurch. I think ultimately an AI model that helps manage our entire grid is the way of the future. Not just for making sure that we have all the energy we need, but from a sustainability point of view, making sure that we're getting the most out of, and when I say utilities, it's not just electricity, it's about water as well, making sure that, we've got our filters running seamlessly. I think, and I don't, people will say that may be 20 years in the future, but the way AI is evolving, I don't think it's going to be too long before AIs are going to be used to automatically be switching networks, automatically turning things on and off, not having an operator switch the button, but letting the AI do it and understanding that. And then the flip side of that is why that's important is there's an example where in Queensland recently, air conditioners were turned on to a low power mode because it was too hot and the network was overloaded. The problem I have is, what if you're in a situation where your house is getting really hot because of that? Having AI control that and having feedback from those sensors back to the house, back into the AI model. You can say, right, we're going to standby. Oh, we've noticed that these 100 houses in Townsville are just getting really, really hot. It's a health problem. Let's switch those back up into normal mode so that we're not, putting people's lives at risk.
Yeah, amazing. I think sustainability or green AI.
Oh.
That's on my agenda this year. I really am keen to investigate green AI as an area that I think is really important, because I think there's so many connected devices out there. We can tell a lot more, we can do a lot more, and we can do it in real time.
Can I just interrupt? Sorry, Tristan.
Yep.
I completely agree. Green AI is so important, but there's two parts of green AI. There's using AI for sustainable outcomes. I completely agree. That is so important. But to do that, we also need to make sure our AI models are green themselves.
Yep.
So what I mean by that is there's still a race to the bottom or the race to the top. People are still saying, how do I get my AI model to be 99% accurate? And sometimes we need, and so as a result, we're just focused on one metric, accuracy or stability. But actually, sometimes near enough is good enough. What we need to do is move ourselves away from just that single metric to understand, I've got a model that is 85% accurate. For me to train that model to be 95% accurate, I shouldn't need to calculate how much carbon that's going to produce. And I can actually say, from 85 to 95%, may burn 10,000 tons of carbon dioxide.
Yep.
But the value I get back from that is only going to be the equivalent of 1,000 ton.
Yep.
Maybe I don't need to train that model to be 95%.
Yep.
Maybe near enough is good enough. And so I think green AI needs to look at both sides. How do we make sure AI is green, and then obviously use AI to make our lives greener? So I completely agree. This is a fascinating area this year.
Nikita, I could talk to you all day on this, but while we're on a positive, right, we're talking about the great things and we can change the world with AI, I think we're going to end it there. But look, this has been an amazing conversation. I've got to thank you for coming on. There's so many amazing advancements in AI and what we can do, and I think you're leading probably the most exciting part of NCS in Australia at the moment around AI and what we can do for other customers and potential industries, and not just healthcare and sports and utilities and stuff, but every industry in general. So thanks for coming on. I hope you've enjoyed yourself.
Thank you, Tristan. I've loved talking to you about this. I'm passionate about this stuff, and maybe we'll talk in the future again.
100%.
Thank you.
If you found today's episode interesting and want to hear more about our Make Tomorrows, please subscribe to our channel.